Now, just to remind you again, this is about traversing, and traversing just simply means walking through something. So we've talked about list, right? We've seen how we can access an item or an element in a list, but how do we really now? And we've also looked at the for loop, right? We've seen that we can do something over and over, and that what that means is that we can take these two things and say, okay, we want to walk through this entire list and see if something exists. So this is the idea behind this project. So we would enter in a text here or an alphabet. So if it's N, we enter N here, and then we click this button search, and it lists all the country that starts with N, and we'll be pulling that data from this data tab. So let's start with that. We need to import our data set first. Now the data set I'll be working with, it's in the science data library. So we would go to, I believe it's internet usage worldwide, and I'm going to import that, and now I have it here. And what that means is that I can now access this data set. And just so we see what's inside this data set, let's click on these, and we see ID, the country or region, and these are all the columns we can access in this data set. I don't know what the data looks like, but we won't be exploring that in this video. Let's head over to the coding aspect of this work. So back to data, we now have the data imported, and that's the first thing we want to do, because immediately we get back to coding, the first thing we want to do here would be to populate the country names. So we would have this variable called country names, and that's going to be get column. Now get column gets a particular column from a table. So let's go ahead and click on this choose, and you can see I already have this table here, right? Internet worldwide usage, and I'll click here and comma, I'll strike the enter button, and that brings me to the columns I can choose from. Now I want to choose this country or region, and I'll click on that, and I'm done with it. So let's go ahead and have a semicolon here, just so we're sure. All right, so one thing I'm going to do now shortly, just so I'm sure that this is actually working, I'll copy that and I'll set the watchers right here. So I'll paste that here and I'll add it here. Okay, so when I run this application now, notice that we have 255 countries, right? So what that means is that now we have access to a list. This is a list. So country names is a list. And so based on what we know so far, say we want to access the first country in this list, we know that we need to do countries 0, right? And let's log that out this time around, say console.log. And let's go ahead and reset and run again. And you can see this is the first country we have in this list, Afghanistan. Now, what if I told you that it's possible for us to actually print out the first 10 countries? Does that ring any bell? Yes, we've talked about the for loop where we worked on printing out, generating numbers, right, from 1 through 20. Just the same idea is the fact that we can now print out the first 20, the first 30, the first 50, the first 10. And in fact, we can even apply the principle of that even number, where we say we want to print out the first 10 countries based on their even indices or indexes. So let's go ahead and let's code this up and let's see. So the first thing we want to do here is to, of course, have an on event on that search button and that search country button. And we would have what we want to do is to click, and we would have a function here. Now in this function, what we want to do is to let's just start by printing out the first 10 numbers. So we know how to do this, right? Based on what we did before, was to say for var I, or this time around I'm just going to call it index equal to 0. Index is less than, so this time let's just say less than 10, and then index plus plus. So what this would mean is, let's just quickly log this out, and just so we see what we are getting out here. So if we go ahead and reset this and run it again, and we'll go ahead and click this button, search, now you notice we have 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 9, right? And again, it doesn't include 10 because we have less than, not less than or equal to. And those are the things that you need to be very mindful of when you're working with the for loop or the while loop or any other loop for that matter. So this condition is satisfied. We're done with this part. Now, how can we take this? Because if you notice, right, these are the same thing that we need. So when I first logged out the country name, console.log, when I printed out the first country name, I did country names, and then I passed in a number, right? And that number was 0 for the first country. So if we go ahead and reset and run again, we see this Afghanistan, right? And that comes from this part of the code right here. And however, when I hit the search button, you notice that we have 0 through 9, right? So is it possible for us to bring in these country names? And I want you to pay attention to what I'm doing now, because this is the code that printed out the name of that country. And let's bring that here and replace this 0. Now we're not longer dealing with 0 because we have this index that already printed out 0 for us, right? It also printed out 1, it also printed out 2, and so on and so forth. So let's cut that out, and let's say we don't want 0, but we want index. And what that means is that we're starting at 0, we're walking all the way to, but not including 10, and we're adding 1 to it each time it finishes, it completes running whatever is within this block of code. So if we go ahead now and reset this application and run again, and we hit on this button search, what do you see? We now have the first 10. Of course, the first Afghanistan you see here actually comes from here. So let's just comment that out, and let's reset and run again, hit the button search. And now you see Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, and so on and so forth, right? So those are the first 10 countries. Now, as you could probably tell, we can then extend these and say we want to print the first 20 countries, we want to print the first 30 countries, and whatever we want to print. But this here is what is called traversing. So this is traversing. When we do this, what we're doing is that we're traversing this list. And by traversing, we mean that we're walking through this list one at a time. And just so you know, we can actually make lots of modifications to this now. So let's say we want to print out the first, not the first now, but we want to print out from the 5th country all the way to the 9th country. How would we do that? And now the way to do that would be for us to start at the 5th country. What would the 5th country be? If you count the index, the 5th country would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? The 5th country is going to be the 4th index. So we type in 4 here, and we say we're walking all the way through, but not including the 10. So let's reset and let's run this again and search, and let's see what we see. Now you notice that we don't have Afghanistan anymore. There's no Andorra anymore. And that's because we've already stated now that we want to start from the 5th. So in fact, if you look at this part where we have these, look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is where we started from, right? Angola. And indeed, that is absolutely correct. So this is traversing, in case you came here to see what traversing is. Now, for those who are here to see how this application is going to be built, all right, let's continue from this point. So what we want to do is to get a text from here, right? How can we get that text? So here we want to say, and notice that I didn't put it inside this for loop, right? Because we're not getting that text over and over again. We're getting that text just once. So let's go ahead and say var letter, or let's just call this country letter equal to, and let's say get text, because we want to get the text from that country letter text box. So what if, once they've entered that, we want to then check if the country name starts with that. And now this is a trick right here. For this, so in this case, I'm going to make a couple of modifications. Maybe I should even comment this out just so you see what I'm doing here. I'm going to move this down, and then I'm going to uncomment this one right here. This is the one I'm going to use. The index is going to start at 0, right? Because we want to walk all the way through to the end of this country names we have here. And notice that even though I know what the value is, 355, we're not going to use that. What do we already know how to do? How do we get the length of a list? We can say country names dot length, and that's going to return to us the length of that list, right? And we want to make sure we're saying this is less than the length. Remember that the highest index is 1 less than the length of the list. So the highest index you can have in a list is 1 less than the length of that list. So now that we've talked about this, and now that we've seen these, I don't want to go ahead and log these out, because we're going to get 255 here in the console output. So now what we want to do is just to take this country name right here, whatever that country name is, we want to say if that country name dot, and there is a function that we would use here called substring. Now substring takes 2 arguments. We need to pass in 2 arguments because it's designed such that it has 2 parameters. So the first argument we pass in is what position we're starting at. So the position for us would be 0, and the end for us would just say 1, because we're just taking in 1 character. So if that is equal to whatever they've entered here, so whatever that country letter is, if it's equal to the country letter, and let's go ahead and log that out. And so this time around, we just want to log out whatever that country is. So country names index. So again, what did I do here? I'm just checking to see if this country name starts. So if you think of substring, it's more like saying this is an entire string. We're taking part of this string. That's why it's called substring. We're taking part of this string. We're starting from 0, but all we want to get is just the first one. So if we pick 2, which I'm going to demonstrate to you in just a moment, but just for now, let's go ahead and run this application and let's see if it works. And I just stopped that, and I'm going to enter A here, and I click that button search, and we don't see anything here, even though we have A here. Why is it so? So let's go ahead and say A here, and I click on search, and I see all the countries with A, right? And that tells me that this is case sensitive. So is there any way we can make this even better? And for now, we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to pretend that the user is going to enter a correct thing. And we would look at that in another video where we correct this kind of problem. So, but for now, let's just keep going. All right. So now, if we go ahead and enter N and we click on search, notice that we now have countries with starting at N. And let me clear this again just so you see. I hit that button again. Now we only have countries with N. So what have we done here? And I was explaining this, right? So let's change this to 2 this time around. I know that Nigeria starts with NI, and I'm going to reset and rerun and come here and type NI, and I hit the button and I don't see anything. That's because I is in uppercase. And I've just changed that to lowercase and I hit the button enter. And now we see only the countries with NI. All right, so now that we've seen that this works correctly, how can we then take this and have that displayed here? Now this should be easy for us because we've talked about having something like this, variable output equal to this. And then here we can go ahead and say we want to concatenate whatever is in output with that country names. And let's in fact have it on a new line. So what can we do now? Once we're done with everything, we come out of the for loop and let's set the text of this output label to output. I'm going to close this. And because we have a semicolon here, just so you know, I'm going to reset this program and run. And let's type N, search, and now you see all the countries with N. Let's type A in search, you see all the countries with A. Let's type G, you search, you see all the countries with G. All right, so that's what I wanted to show you here, but this is traversing. And we've also seen how to use the substring. I'm going to talk a little bit more on substring, but for now, I hope you enjoyed this. Take care.